Hey everyone, Christian here, and we are doing a video in my bedroom. And only because my office right now is just kind of a mess, and I want to do a video that really touched on how to take care of palms that were suffering from cold damage. Probably should have done this last week before the cold struck, or during at least, but there's still plenty of time to take care of plants that have suffered from the damage. It does take a while for it to kind of go all the way through, and there are things you can do to reverse that. So if you're from Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, that area of the country, you will want to watch this video. So I'm going to start first with palms that are not crown shafted, because you're going to want to treat crown shafted and non-crown shafted palms differently. So if you have any sort of date palms, any phoenix, any shamrops, Mediterranean fan palm, trachycarpus, queen palms, coconuts if you have them in far south Texas, and everything in between. You're welcome to ask any questions in the comments down below. I'm going to be very responsive to this video because any questions I really want to have answered as soon as possible because it's important. Time is of the essence. So when the cold, say the cold came through, you didn't protect your plants, which is okay. So, it takes a lot of effort to protect just even one plant that's of a decent size, and they're all brown now. So any fronds that are brown and have no green on them whatsoever, you want to go ahead and trim them up. You don't want to, there's no, brown fronds do your palm no good. In fact, all they can do is invite fungus and disease. So you want to cut them up. If you want to be very meticulous, use very sharp cutters. Try not to use a saw, because a saw will not make a very fine cut. It'll kind of like mash it a little bit, and that can add more surface area for fungus and insects to get in and kill the crown of your palm, which is already going to be compromised. So the first thing you want to do is kind of go through and just take off anything that's basically dead, anything frizzled. If the frond is like 3/4 dead, just go ahead and cut the entire thing off. You can trim the palm all the way to the spear. If there's still a spear that's sitting there, don't mess with it just yet. We'll get to that pretty soon. But you want to just basically cut off all the fronds. It can look like a telephone pole if it needs to, but any dead fronds are just not going to do any good. So if you want to be very, like I said, you want to be very careful. Use very sharp pruners. You can even take a torch and cauterize the edges of the fronds where you make the cuts, so that fungus will not be able to get in. It'll just kind of dry it out and just cauterize it. You can use a slight, or not slight, but you can use hydrogen peroxide kind of on the edges to sort of just make sure that no fungus really gets in. You really want to, it's kind of like dealing with a gangrenous part of your body where you need to actually you're really doing like an amputation process here. So once you have kind of dealt with all of that, save the green parts if there are any, which would be great if there are. Now start looking at the spear. So you want to go to the emerging spear, and if it's just a spike, you want to give it a tug. Tug it like, as you would kind of just lift it. Don't try and tug it really hard. Because you're just going to you might rip healthy tissue out. But you want to kind of just give it a tug, like a firm tug. And if it stays in there, that's good. If it does not, well, let's start with if it stays in there. If it stays in there, look for any necrotic tissue. So any blackened areas, any brown areas that look like they're dead. And if it's not that much, you can go ahead and just sort of pour hydrogen peroxide sort of around those areas. You really just want to make sure it's as sanitary as possible, because where the spear is, where it comes out of, where it's called the meristem, and that is going to be the place that you want to keep alive. The trunk may be stunted, the fronds may be dead, but if you want the palm to stay alive, that meristem, the apical meristem, has to stay alive. So once you check out the spear, say it doesn't tug, you want to take, let's say this is your spear, right? So you go ahead and take a permanent marker and mark at the base of the spear, when you first start, and then check it every day or two and see if it's moving at all. And if you see it moving, that's a good sign. That means that the palm is pushing that spear out, that it is has something going on where it is growing. So the stem is not died yet. If it isn't moving, then you want to every couple of days or so give it that kind of firm pull to see if it's going to pull out. So eventually either the spear is going to grow out of it and the palm will continue to grow again and make a full crown. The spear will die off and just sort of frizzle off and die like the other frond, which is kind of unclear what's going to happen next, or the spear will pull. So let's go past the growing out and everything being all right, because that means everything will be okay. If it does go ahead and kind of die on you, it doesn't want to pull, just kind of trim off the dead parts as they're coming out. And you really just want to keep on just kind of trimming up, making sure that any dead parts are just kind of out of there. Because they can't provide anything good for the palm. They can only allow for fungus and insects to come in. So now if the spear ends up pulling, then if you tug on it and then it just kind of gives and you'll pull it out, usually the base will be kind of mushy and it might smell bad because it's been rotting. And that is not the end of the world. It's not great. It's not even good, but it's not the end of the world. If you go ahead and pull that out, the first thing you want to do is sort of kind of clean out any extra stuff that's down there in the base. You can use, I'd recommend using something plastic, something metal or sharp can kind of get in there and sort of cause more damage. So just kind of scrape it out, maybe with like a plastic spatula or something like some sort of plastic object you would normally use to kind of like get things out of like a PVC pipe or something. And clean that area out. Take hydrogen peroxide 3%. You don't need to use 35%. That's a little bit much. You can dilute it, 1/10, and that's about what you would need to 3% or 3.5%. And go ahead and pour. For a mature palm, you can pour an entire quart in there. For smaller palms, you can kind of pour like 4 or 5 ounces. You can pour more if you'd like. You can't really pour too much. I wouldn't like douse it in it, but enough so that it kind of puddles up into the top of the crown, and it can spill over. That's okay. And what it's going to do is just kind of kill off any bacteria. Just sanitize that area. Make sure that it's not growing any more fungus, and basically telling insects like, hands off. This is not going to happen. So in the meantime, you will want to check for new growth in the area and kind of, give the trunk a little bit of a push, kind of move, like check the trunk for its firmness. You want to press into it. You can press it really hard and kind of see if it's giving at all. If it is giving, that means it is rotting inside the trunk, and that is definitely not good. You don't want it to be squishy. What you can do if it gets to that point, you can start to cut lower and lower. Like let's say the crown is here, right? And this is where the crown is kind of given out. You can cut, you want to start like shaving off and seeing until you get to a part where you're exposing, the meristem. And hopefully you'll eventually get to healthy tissue, which will be either kind of white or green. Bad tissue will be brown or black. And you will want to just you can do that right away if you want, but it can cause a lot of scarring, and it's kind of a last measure. If I would pull away any sort of like fibers, because fibers will collect more water, and you kind of want to keep the area dry. You can use anything like a battery operated blower and kind of go in there, make sure no leaves kind of settle in there with any water, and anything that's going to cause, anything that would normally cause, say, an infection on your skin, you wouldn't want in there. So you don't want just like random dirt, that sort of thing. Just think of it as like a deep wound in your arm or something to that effect. So eventually it will either grow a new spear. It'll probably grow. If it does, it'll probably be stunted, which is okay because it will eventually. It'll eventually grow regular fronds back again, but the first ones might be stunted because of the cold. They didn't develop properly. They're mechanically, not normal. So check for all those things. Check for firmness, or hopefully the trunk will stay firm. Now the palm can die sort of from the inside out, and you won't know. It'll just be so dried up from being frozen solid that it'll just fall apart. This happens with coconuts especially. I've seen coconuts look okay for 2 weeks, and then suddenly you go to push on it and the whole trunk falls over. We're talking like 8 feet of wood just going straight on the ground, and that's not good. So don't, when you see, if you think everything is all right, just really check and see if everything is okay, because I've seen coconut, like stuff like coconuts and even queens, look like they were fine, and they literally just broke off at the roots. I've seen it happen to Canary Island dates, Phoenix canariensis. So that is basically what you would want to do with non-crown shafted palms. Now, a crown shafted palm is a little bit different because you're dealing with like separate boots, which are kind of holding the meristem in at the base, like kind of just underneath. And you can be a little bit more liberal with the way you trim, because you're going to want to get as much, because all that soft tissue there. So with a non-crown shafted palm, you have hardened off, woody material, the boots of the fronds. But when you hit the fronds form a soft tissue base in the crown shafted palm. So let's just say you have a royal, right? So you have a small royal, or this will be easier just for the sake of using, but you can apply it to a royal. Let's say that you have a bottle palm, Hyophorbe legenicalis, right? So you're sitting there, and let's say the fronds are totally toast, and trim them all off. You can basically use all the steps that I said before. Trim them all off, look for the spear, check on it, and if it goes ahead and pulls, what I would do, instead of checking and pouring hydrogen peroxide and checking and seeing what happens, because this is all soft tissue and it's all showing, it's all necrotic, you're just going to want to take the bases of the bottle palm or any crown shafted palm, and you're going to want to like take like a razor blade and kind of cut around all the bases of these things and kind of get to the inside. You want to keep on going until you find healthy tissue. When you find healthy tissue, you want to stop, because if it's out in the open and can be aired out, hopefully that'll stop any sort of fungus from getting in there. Same thing goes for, say, a royal. You want to keep on going until you find that healthy tissue. And you can keep on cutting more and cutting more and cutting more. And you really want to make sure that soft tissue is exposed, the healthy soft tissue is exposed to open air. When it's just sitting there, it's just going to turn completely necrotic. You don't want that. To give you an example, I had a spindle, and this is in 2010, and all the fronds turned black. This is 28.5 degrees Fahrenheit, so about -2.5 Celsius, something like that. And they had all turned brown. I went ahead, I took a little like X-Acto knife and cut around, got all the bases off, and essentially it was still like just mushy. So I took a Sawzall, a reciprocating saw, and just cut off the top of the palm, right about 6 inches above where the woody trunk was, and it was still bad. So I went to like 4 inches, and I went to 2 inches. Finally, at 2 inches, there was nothing but healthy tissue. You want to sort of play surgeon as best as you can to cut any sort of black, dead material out of the middle of that palm, because that is like, you do not want black material where the palm growth starts, because that will it'll spread and end up killing the plant, or it can invite insects to come in and kill your palm. And if you care as much about palms as I do, you really want to save every single one, especially if they mean something to you, if they're sentimental. And you can go ahead and pour hydrogen peroxide in those as well, but you don't want to pour too much on like exposed soft tissue. You might end up kind of drying out that tissue when it needs that moisture. And in the meantime, on warm days, go ahead and water at the base. Try not to water inside, crown shafted or non-crown shafted palms. You really want to keep that area dry. You can pour hydrogen peroxide in there. That's not going to water it, but water at the roots. Do not fertilize at all. Fertilizer will not help. It's like it's like giving a bacon cheeseburger to a starving child that hasn't had any meat in years. The body, it won't be able to handle it, and it will just end up causing more problems. So what to expect once let's say the palm, you start seeing growth, you can mark at the base. Let's say you have like a base to mark from on the crown shafted palm. Mark a base area, maybe on like a small royal, there is a spear that's still green. Mark it next to like a a petiole, and then check on it every few days, see if it's moving. Even a few millimeters is good. Any movement is good. So you will eventually find that the palm will either grow out of the cold snap and it'll put out new fronds, or it'll start to go downhill. And you can start using those methods that are more and more intrusive, and then once those things work, you want to kind of back off. You don't want to use that unless you have to. Now, you can use copper fungicide. If you get a full spear pull, let's say there's like 3 spears, they all pull out, and there's just this massive hole in your palm, like a last minute thing. And I've never used it before because I don't like it. But copper fungicide, you can use it as a foliar spray, although if there's no foliage, it's kind of useless. But you can also use it to pour into the crown. It's kind of like a defibrillator for for a palm. It's like a crash card to get it to go to live again, to kill anything that might possibly be in there. I prefer to use hydrogen peroxide. It's just better for, it's not as invasive, but if you really want to make sure you got killed every single thing that could possibly hurt your plant, you can do that. It's also toxic. That's why I don't use it, and that might seem kind of ridiculous, but I just prefer to not have to worry about inhaling toxic fumes. So once you start to see growth coming back again, this is what to expect. Now, even on palms that are going to survive, you're going to see mechanical deficiencies. You'll see like stunted leaves. They might look like a full size leaf, but they're not full. They might have like a full frond. Like say you have a foxtail, for example, and it puts out a nice plumose leaf, but it's only a couple feet long. I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's really just the palm trying to form new foliage, but not being able to fully do it because either lack of energy or just fungal issues, and it will eventually put out full-size leaflets. And that happens to go for crown-shafted and non-crown shafted palms. You won't see that as often on palmate palms as you will on pinnate palms. Not really sure why. Maybe it's just because of the size of the frond is not as big and doesn't deform as much, but that's just my theory. So as it gets warmer, you're just going to want to really, you're going to notice that on crown shafted palms and even non-crown shafted palms that you're going to see some stunting. The trunk is going to, because you're going to pull a lot of boots off, the rings in the trunk are going to get very short. And they may not look great, but at least like 5 years from now, if that palm lives, you can say, hey, this is what happened in 2021. This is where it survived. I've seen bottle palms down here, and you can see where 1989 happened, because there's just like, it comes up and it's just like, whoop, and there's like 2 inches of trunk, and yet it comes back out and forms a sort of a fat crown there again. And it's kind of neat, even though it doesn't look great. You can have a story to tell that you saved your plant. So as weather warms up, when you know there's not going to be a frost, you can start to water it more. You can throw down some time release fertilizer. Don't use instant release fertilizer, because you can end up burning the palm up and just causing issues again. It's sort of like the whole bacon cheeseburger scenario. You want to feed it more of like a just more of a safer diet, I guess. Just protein, like just think of it as giving it yogurt as opposed to bacon cheeseburgers, I guess. You still get your protein, it's just a little bit healthier for it. So, yeah, I in the summertime, you can what you want to do is kind of boost the palm. You want to get more time release fertilizer going. Make sure there's plenty of water. Take good care of it. Make sure it's healthy. So in case you have a cold snap the following year, it's healthy and hopefully can go through that. Hopefully you won't have that. But you want to get the palm back to where it was before. And a healthy palm is always going to be more cold hardy than say you have 2 palms of the same species. One is well grown, one is kind of stunted and just not looking that great. Maybe it's yellow, maybe it's deficient in magnesium or potassium. The palm that is well grown and or larger is always going to be more cold hardy. So that shouldn't come as a surprise. It seems like a good, logical. And you want to make sure that your palm is nice and healthy again for any possible cold snap that may happen in the future. So I hope that was useful. I know it's kind of just me running on some information about how to save your palms, but I figured something was better than nothing. And it has to be hanging out in the bedroom here at 1 o'clock in the morning to help you guys out, or gals out, if there's women out there doing that as well. I'm happy to see anyone save their plants. And I've seen a lot of damage so far in a lot of photos, a lot of serious damage. And I hope everybody's palms, as many of them, can survive. And I hope this video can help out. So if you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and you want to see more discussions about tropical plants, especially palms, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments about saving your palms from cold snaps like this, leave them down below and I will try and get to them as soon as I can. And thank you for watching.